in dealings with short-term vacation rentals in not necessarily a great context prior to coming to Alpharetta. So I will listen with an open mind and hope to enjoy your feedback tonight as we talk about this. We have representatives of our code enforcement here in the room. James is with the administration office. Kathy Cook, our community development director, here is in the room. Our city attorney, Molly Eswine, is finally on her 4th trip of going to the 3rd floor, successful with at least looks like she retrieved her backpack. It was playing a game with whose card would open the doors, and we finally found one that worked. I will point out Representative Chuck Martin just entered the room, as I like to point out elected officials as they show up. Chuck, former mayor of Alpharetta, and now represents us in the State House. Having said that, we're here to just talk, and I'm interested in what parts of Alpharetta you all come from. I'm interested in your feedback on whether you know of rentals in your neighborhood, whether they are good rentals, whether you might be the owner of a vacation rental and you say, I'm a good operator and I want to show you why this is a good thing to have in a community. So we're completely open to hearing what you all have to say tonight. Got lots of note takers. We'll try our best to answer questions, but we really didn't come here tonight. We didn't advertise that we were going to come present to you and try to convince you to see it one way or the other. This truly is in interest in hearing what you all have to say as members of our community. So having said that, James has got a microphone. We'll let him navigate the crowd like Donahue. Gosh, I just maybe gave my age away.
Yeah, you and I remember it. A lot of our staff does.
They don't?
I've said Phil Donahue to a few of them. They don't have a clue.
They don't have a clue who that is. All right, good enough. Who wants to kick off? Oh, goodness, we got a couple of hands right away. So
We're
great,
start
that's
in
awesome.
the middle. Love it.
Should I have it stand up?
You don't have to stand. I'll just sit here beside you.
All right. Hello everyone. Can I hold it? Oh, okay. My name is Meredith. I own an Airbnb in Alpharetta. I've lived in Alpharetta my whole life. I'm 40, but I've been here since I was a little kid. I went to Alfred Elementary. I'm like an OG Alpharettan. And I'm here in support of short-term rentals. And I wanted to kind of explain, I get the vibe from the people I'm sitting around that maybe not everybody is in support of them, but I would like to share with you a little bit about mine and why it's a good thing for the city. So mine, I keep everything super tidy and clean, and my yard is gorgeous because I'm trying to earn those 5-star reviews. You're not gonna find any like code violations or anything unsightly on my property because I'm working extra hard to make it a 5-star place. And most of the people, interestingly, that use my Airbnb are locals. So when we had the really cold storm, I guess in the last winter, and a lot of people had pipes that burst, we had people stay that their home in Alpharetta had gotten flooded, and they needed a place where their kids and their pets could all come that a hotel really couldn't accommodate. So I do 100% respect HOA rules, and HOAs making rules against Airbnbs, but if you own a home in a non-HOA area, I feel like you should have the freedom to provide an Airbnb to people who want to visit. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'm really interested to hear the people who are against it, like why you wouldn't like it, because from my perspective, it's great to be an Airbnb owner. It helps me provide for my family. It's not like a huge income, but it helps me, take care of my kids and pay for their karate lessons and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let me ask just one quick follow-up question if I can. So that house is in Alpharetta. Sometimes when I come across an Airbnb owner, you also might own them in other cities. Or you just have the one property, or only in Alpharetta? Okay, then I can't ask the follow-up question I wanted to ask because it wouldn't be valid. I will recognize that, but I didn't know if you maybe had others in Georgia. Great. All right. Thank you for that. We'll come back to you if anybody in the crowd has questions. We'll go back in the back to our next comment. Please.
We're on.
Okay. My name is Bob Vonderhorst. I live in Bellsmith, Regency, and I have a couple questions, and sir, I think you might be better one to answer the first one. I've looked all over the internet, and I'm getting mixed information about what short-term rentals do to property values, especially those on either side of what we refer to as a hotel within our community?
Okay.
That's one I
Got that
think
as a-
because of what your background is, you might have a good sense for that.
So I'm going to answer it as honestly as I can, and it's not it's not scientific. It is personal experience. So you asked personal experience. I lived next to a short-term vacation rental for all 7.5 years that I was there, and 7.5 years later, I put the house back on the market, and it had doubled in price. And so I don't know if I can tell you that there was any loss of value, because that was my unique experience having lived right next door to one. I haven't read any significant literature data on the topic of reduction in property values, but I could also tell you stories, having managed that city, I can tell you stories of party houses that did probably, in fact, reduce value in houses. So I could probably show you examples both ways.
Okay. All right, I've got here, then I'm coming down there, oh, wait, there.
Thank you. My name is Ray Reese.
You can free up the mic, James. I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
I'm not worried about this crowd.
I'll hand it
we're
back
good.
as soon as you tell me to. Okay. This is my wife, Maureen. The two of us live very close. We have several B&Bs, a couple here in the City of Alpharetta and a couple elsewhere, one of which is actually a licensed LLC and is a government-regulated entity. So we kind of have a bit of a cross-section perspective on that. I'm sure you're probably going to hear a lot of comments about some of the important social economic impacts of considering this, and I think that's great because they're important ones and they should be all carefully considered. I don't have that to offer. What my wife and I have to offer, though, is that we are probably an example of owners who are very responsible, very involved. We spend a considerable amount of time keeping track of our properties, keeping up with the maintenance in the properties. We're very selective about who we allow to stay in the properties. And so for those maybe who aren't as familiar, there are mechanisms in place within platforms like Airbnb where you can be selective and choose the people who have already earned good ratings. So we've not had those problems with parties and noise and parking and trash cans and things like that. So I would be an advocate for doing this responsibly. I would offer it can be done responsibly, and I would say that we're actually proof. And then finally, my wife is of Irish descent, and so in her upbringing, B&Bs were kind of a fabric of the culture. She finds the platform to be incredibly rewarding from that perspective. We have met people, like this lady mentioned, from down the road who are displaced because they're building a home, or we've met people from other countries, and we have, and in some instances, become very good friends and continue those relationships to this day. So there is that entire side of the Airbnb equation. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you. Let me follow up there, maybe with it one more. Since you had multiples, do you have any short-term vacation rentals that are in cities that do have some form of local regulation? Gainesville? Okay. How would you characterize it if you were to, on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it a good ordinance, bad ordinance, or somewhere in the middle?
It's the government sort of getting $1 from our enterprise, but it's not particularly burdensome. It does ensure certain things, for example, that you're not allowing more people to stay than could stay safely from a sanitary perspective. You've got fire detectors, and I mean, there's that inspection. Other than that, really, it's just a monthly tally and a percentage of earnings that go to the county, so from a tax base.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Helpful.
Okay, here you go.
Come on up and join me.
Good evening. My name is S.C. Escobedo. I'm a very proud long-term resident of Alpharetta and a small business owner. I am not here in opposition to short-term rentals. I feel that it's a free enterprise, and I'm all for that. However, I also serve on the board of my HOA. We have a restrictive covenant against leasing in our community. And we believe that if someone decides to convert their single-family residence into a hotel, that they should conform with all of the regulations and ordinances that pertain to commercial businesses. They should obtain a business license, and we advocate that the City of Alpharetta have a roster of HOAs that prohibit short-term rentals, and in that regard, they would preclude granting of a business license to any property that is residing within an HOA. So while I'm not against short-term rentals, I am against some type of regulation so that we can have peace and harmony in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. James is going to grab that. Okay, we can go here since we're having a discussion.
My question is, why would you need the city to have a regulation? Why couldn't that just be handled by the HOA by fining them or something like that?
We are a small community of 63 homes. We cannot afford the litigation expense of going after every single person that decides to convert their single-family residence into a business. That's the answer.
Okay.
Okay, I think we
So some financial concerns. So I promise we're going to get to everybody. So
Well, my name is Tanya Kerner, and I live on Dena Drive, which is at Jane Ellen, right down the street. And I was so excited to move to the City of Alpharetta 7 years ago and be a part of the fabric of this community that I work at, and damn it, I designed. I was the designer of Avalon and almost everything around here. So I moved into the biggest HOA that exists, the City of Alpharetta, and there are code enforcement people that come around and tell you your grass is too high, you can't do this, you can't do that. So I never in a million years dreamed that I would have an HOA next door to me. I was so, or a bed and breakfast or whatever you call it. But anyway, I was excited to meet my new neighbors, put my happy face on, couldn't wait for my dog to meet them, and then I find out I'm going to have this person and then that person and then the other person. And I'm walking my dog, and he's got to deal with new dogs on a constant basis. It's not a stable community anymore. We're friendly people. We have cocktail parties on our front lawns, and we know each other, and we know each other's children's, and we know that they're cars. And now I've got strangers in and out of my little neighborhood, and I don't like that. And I feel put upon because I choose to live in the city limits, and I choose to live on a city street, and my city doesn't protect me when the HOAs do. So now that the HOAs are saying, not in my backyard, not next to me, then I have 5 now in my little cluster. And I no longer have a community. I have transients in my neighborhood. And I bet you the people who own HOAs or own Airbnbs live in neighborhoods where you don't have them. You wouldn't want it next door to you. You don't know who your neighbors are. I don't know if they're there scoping the kid down the street. I don't know if they're there to case my place. I don't know what happens when you can't rent it for 3 months and some of the homeless people from down the street are squatters next door to me. I just don't like the transient nature of it because I'm a friendly person and I love my neighbors and I want to know my neighbors. And how do you build a good, cohesive neighborhood when people are just tramping through your neighborhood left and right? So that's what I got to say.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, well, so we have till my next meeting's at 8:15 in the morning, so we're good. We'll be here all night. Yeah, no, I'm okay with the response, but I just want everybody to feel comfortable that we are going to get to them. So just because we said wait here to go back here doesn't mean we're not coming right back here. So we'll make coffee. Waffle House is down the street. As long as we're done by 8:15 in the morning, we're good.
I'm a short-term rental host, and I am Irish, and we're very hospitable people. And in Ireland, the idea of banning, any sort of short-term rental would just not fly at all, because they understand it's the livelihood. They understand that these people are wonderful people, just like you and I. And my question to you all is, have you ever rented a short-term rental? Have you ever been on vacation and gone somewhere? Do you consider yourself a transient? I mean, do you consider yourself a menace? I understand that, but what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these people, I mean, you say you're friendly, you like to talk to them. Reach out and find out where they're from. There's some really interesting people that visit our community. One of the families that visited our community was a family from South Africa. And when they arrived, they'd been traveling for 36 hours. And so they had a little baby, and I reached out and I offered to hold the baby while they unpacked their bags. And that family is now, I'm gonna get emotional here. They're very much a part of our lives. That little boy is now almost 5, and he calls me Grandma, or Gigi. And it was only through that encounter that we were able to meet these people. So I don't agree. I don't think these people are transients. I think they're just like you and I. They just want a better option than a hotel. They want somewhere that is spacious, potentially has a room for their dog, somewhere they can have family game night with their children, somewhere where they have room to relax as a family and not be just limited to the option of a hotel. And I think that, that side of the argument needs to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, yeah, I guess, having lived next to one, I can tell you stories that tell just like that, and I can tell stories that tell just like that. And so it's not a one size fits all. I mean, I can tell you of some great people that I've met, and I can tell you of some hot dogs that I've thrown back over the fence when the party got wild. So there are good stories and bad stories.
So I'm Lisa Schipple, and I could probably talk about short-term rentals until 8:30 tomorrow morning, if you want me to.
So it was 8:15.
Oh, 8:15.
So 8:30 is too long.
So I have owned short-term rentals for about 10 years now in other cities. I have lived in Alpharetta for 30 years. I'm a business owner. I live in a neighborhood that has short-term rentals because there is no HOA, and I do have a short-term rental in a neighborhood that I don't live in that also does not have an HOA. I chose to turn this home of mine into a short-term rental back in April because this house, when I got it back from my long-term renter, had about $25,000 worth of damage to it. I am a real estate attorney here in Alpharetta, and if someone's going to create $25,000 worth of damage to my house, imagine what they can do in other long-term rentals. I decided to have a short-term rental because that way I can go into this house every few days and check on it. I can also earn the same amount that I do on a long-term rental and have less use in my property on a monthly basis. I also, that way it's also using less services of the city. And what you may or may not know is that all of my guests pay taxes to the city, including the hotel tax. So it is a revenue stream for the city of Alpharetta. My average guests, I have a lot of repeat guests, although I've only been doing this for a few months now here in Alpharetta. One of them is a business lady who comes every month to Alpharetta for business. She is a single woman. She brings her puppy with her, and she's nervous going out of a hotel at night to walk her dog. And so she rents my Airbnb on a regular so she can open up the backyard and let her dog out into the backyard because we're pet friendly. The other guests, for the most part, are people visiting their family in Alpharetta where they can't stay with the family because there's not enough room for them in the house, or they're bringing a pet and they can't have their pet with their parents' pet or whatnot. I've had people who were displaced again from the pipe freezing back in the winter months. And for me, though, it's really just peace of mind that no one's tearing up my house. No one's going to rent my home from me if it doesn't stay of a 5-star value. If it's dirty when they walk in, they're writing me up and I'm not getting another renter. If the lawn is overgrown, I am not getting another renter. If the sheets are dirty, if there is any little thing or a hair out of place in my house, I am not getting another renter. My house looks 100 times better than when the trash that lived there moved out, left my place a mess. And so while Some people have different issues. I don't allow parties. I don't allow more guests than can comfortably sleep in my home. So I have what's a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath home. I allow 5 guests, really just in case there's a couple with 3 small children. But I really vet it. I don't try and overwhelm the house. I don't allow more than 2 pets because I'm not running a zoo. I'm a citizen of Alpharetta, and I'm trying to keep things good for my neighbors and good for the community. And I do believe that most short-term renters who are local are doing the same thing. And I own a property in Florida, and I own a property in Montana, and they're 2 different situations with 2 different regulations, and I can give you all that information that you need. But Airbnb or short-term rental is not always a bad thing. My last tenants were awful. They were awful for the community, and I couldn't get rid of them because they were paying rent, and I couldn't go and inspect to see my carpets ripped out, my ceiling fan hanging from the ceiling. It was a disaster. This way, every time someone checks out, I can go in, make sure it's nice and neat. You know, no one's calling me and complaining. Anyway, I can keep rambling, but it won't.
Thank you. Thank you. No, that's,
So,
probably pretty active management.
as a business model for myself, I don't rent my properties cheaply. I find that I get better clientele if I have a higher price. They're willing to pay for something that's well kept. Okay, I also, my Airbnb, or it's not an Airbnb, it's a short-term rental, is halfway between my home and my office. So on Tuesdays, I'm driving past the house, I'm taking the trash out. On Wednesdays, I'm driving past the house, I'm bringing the trash back up. I'm going in after the cleaners to make sure everything looks good. Every single time someone leaves my house, I am checking it to see if I have to touch up paint. That's what I'm doing. I also know my neighbors that are around my home, and so that if there is an issue, they can feel free to call me and tell me. I've never had anyone call and complain, but I introduce myself, and they know I own this house, and it's a short-term rental, and if you have any problems, please feel free to call me.
You're doing a great job. How do you make sure that all owners of these properties do what you do?
So,
last question before we get some other comment.
Exactly. Most of them do. And if they don't, then there's other rules and regulations where you can call the police. They're having a party late at night or doing something that's destructive. That's why we have code enforcement or police officers here in the city.
Great, thank you. Let's go to this gentleman right here, and then we'll go back here.
Which gentleman did you?
Yeah.
And folks, I would
I've
ask one
seen
thing when we got these back and forths going.
5 hands.
Let
so-
me get to you with a microphone because we are recording and we are streaming this. So I want to make sure everything's on the record.
Thank you for doing this, Chris. I do respect the opinions, particularly ones that aren't in an HOA. Yeah, you shouldn't be enforced upon a rule not thrown at you. I do respect the people that are doing it well. The challenge is rules aren't for the people that do things well, it's for the people that don't do things well. We happen to live in the largest HOA. About 10% of the homes in all of Alpharetta are in our HOA. And the challenge gets to be, and by the way, don't listen to me, talk to the people. I'm pretty sure it's your C and D squad of the police. That's the 2 evening squads. If you mention anything about Windward and the challenge that they have with short-term rentals, they will tell you exactly which house, exactly what the problems are. And the issue gets to be, it's the ones that have say a swimming pool in the backyard. It's the one that have a very nice, layout for a massive party. They're on the lake. It travels across the lake. And it just, the thing is, when we bought our home, we bought a home in a community of homes. We did not buy a home in the middle of a business park. And to protect the HOAs, the way to do it, at least in my opinion, if you're going to have the regulations, put the regulations to avoid it in HOAs and have the HOAs opt in. Because the challenge now is anybody that's already in an HOA, they follow the rules at which time they became part of the HOA. So as a result, this comes in, it doesn't impact the 2,500 homes that are in the neighborhood. It starts impacting them one by one of the future homeowners. So if it's an opt-in and an HOA decides they want it, great. I'm not against businesses, but I think most people that, and at least in our neighborhood, that bought a home, bought it to be in a residential neighborhood. They didn't buy it to be in the middle of a business complex.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I was just working a half circle unless you want something else.
Your show, boss.
And it's your mic, so you tell me where you want to go next. Hello, sir.
Hi, good evening. Just to piggyback to and add to your question to how to we can make sure that every host does that. There are plenty of devices out there that allow us to and check on our units from time to time, from Ring doorbells to front door cameras and rear door cameras as well, and even a device which is called Minute, by the way, to every single short-term host owner here. It is a sensor, for a CO alarm. It is a noise monitoring alarm, a sensor alarm for every single type of movement that it can feel inside the house. And by the way, you can integrate with every single Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO platform, and if it listens to any type of noise, let's just say after 2 a.m., which is something that you set up, it automatically messages the guest through the Airbnb platform to, hey, listen, please, like you're disrupting the neighbors or anything like that. So there are plenty of ways actually to checking on that. Also, this type of device also calls the cops if they continue to do that for, like, let's just say 30 more minutes, even though after you already messaged them. So there are plenty of ways to do that. I guess my whole take on the whole thing is like to not banish, but to incentivize responsible hosts to take better care of their units, take better care of their neighbors. I don't think anybody actually here has any problems wants any problems with their neighbors whatsoever. So how about finding ways to incentivize better ways to hosting people? Avoiding one-night stays, incentivizing more days, like just say it's 3 days. For great part of my guests are actually people who work at Microsoft or other big companies here. When the pandemic hit, we were getting like a load, but I'm talking about a load of nurses who were coming to assist like hospitals around with like all the patients from COVID. So, of course, there are always two sides of the stories. I had guests that I didn't like, but at the same time, just banish the whole thing, I think is a big time mistake.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Yeah, I'm familiar with some of those listening devices that trigger at certain decibel levels and make some notifications. Those are in fact, at least in my experience, those have been effective. Where'd you go, James? We're going there next, and then we're coming over on this side, to this side.
Keith Dunn, my wife Lynn and I run a corporate housing firm, so mostly out of apartment communities, but we rent for 30 days or more. And some of the same things that I've heard here is like, we've got, I don't know how many families that we had in the winter when pipes burst, and they need to be there for several months. That's pretty typical for us. So ours is 30 days minimum, background checks, things of that nature. And I can say we've been in this business for 4 years. We occasionally have noise complaints, somebody's walking, too loud upstairs or whatever. But we haven't had any of we just don't have the parties or anything like that. It's apartment communities, and it's well managed, and we work with the different apartment communities and the different folks. So it's a bit of a different business model. I'm not in a HOA. I'm in apartment communities. Largely, I've got one house, one exception, but mostly it's in apartment communities, and I get traveling nurses, doctors, things of that nature, and people who, if it was me, I don't want to be in a hotel for, a month. 60 days, that would be torture.
When you say apartment communities, what's how many units? How big are these?
In Alpharetta, we've got 7 or 8, but
Okay.
we're across the north metro area.
Okay, so not the traditional what we would expect to see as an apartment complex where you drive out and have 16 buildings. You're more just a handful of units.
Yeah, and we get some business out of VRBO and Airbnb, but we've got website and things of that nature. So it's our business, and we get some business out of there, but a certain percentage.
Okay. Thank you. I think right there, and then we're coming over here. Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm Jerry Chappell. I want to share my experience with a short-term rental place that we have on our street.
Okay.
First of all, I moved here from Washington, D.C. Love living there, but it's very transient, even with your friends, let alone people on your street, people in your apartment complex. You never really know who you're dealing with, and that's exhausting after a while. So I was excited to come to Georgia, establish a residence where I knew my neighbors, I knew the people on my street, and never had to figure everything out every day. We have someone in the subdivision on my street, who rents their basement out. And we do get all kinds of random people all the time. They're not disrespectful. They're not, no trouble at all. But the owner had to add more lights, which shines into their next door neighbors and shines, believe it or not, for me, I'm down the street, I can see the extra lights. The people who are short-term renters don't have children, so they're racing down the street, turning around in the double cul-de-sac and racing back out. They're not stakeholders, and they don't care. And I understand that people like short-term rentals for whatever reason, but it's affected those of us on the street, and it's affected the entire subdivision because a lawsuit has resulted from it. A multi-million-dollar lawsuit that has broken our HOA. We can't even fix our fence because there's no money. The legal fees back and forth has taken what used to be a nice community and really torn it apart. I get the impression the city doesn't really have anything that we can go to and say, how can we resolve this? The HOA, no one, when the subdivision was established, no one could have anticipated that people were going to start buying houses and rent them out short term. So the HOA covenants just haven't kept up. And now we can't do anything because it looks like it's a reaction to the lawsuit. I did not move into a community so that I didn't know who I was living near and who was on my street, and that it was going to threaten me with an assessment so I could pay somebody else's legal bills. It's been unfair to those of us who have paid our dues, our HOA dues every year, and been good neighbors. It's been a very unpleasant experience, and I'd like the city to come up with something where if you live in a residential neighborhood, it's residential, and if you live someplace else, it's something else. But to spring that on most of us who have never anticipated we'd be living next door to a business has been very difficult, and again, turned the neighborhood into a rumor mill. It's become very unfriendly, and it'll never come back from it, I don't think.
Understand. Thank you for those comments.
Okay, so I'm going here, over there, back there. Then I had a first timer over here, and then I'm going to come back to you.
Hey, good evening. My name is Byron. I'm sorry to hear about your experience. That would be tough. I also rent my basement as a short-term rental. I'm the best listening device there is. I do have cameras that point to the street so I can make sure people are parking in areas that are not bothering my neighbors. I agree with these ladies that having a 5-star rating helps attract good tenants, and that you do have an opportunity to reject folks if they don't have reviews, if they, there are people that sometimes try to rent the same day, and that always makes my hair stand up a little bit, so I try to get people that book in advance. I will tell you that, if my neighbors have any concerns, they come over and talk with me, and I deal with those folks. But I've had, like many of you, people that were displaced. My neighbors rented my place for 4.5 months because they were remodeling their kitchen. They wanted to live close by so they could check on the progress. I was really surprised. Most of the people that came before COVID were primarily business folks coming to town to work for AT&T or Hewlett-Packard or whoever. Now I'm finding that it's a lot more folks traveling to visit family. The pets is a big thing. Hotels aren't very pet friendly. They like to have a yard. There's a dog park down the street from my house. There's a lot of convenient things that people are able to take advantage of. I will say that I have had no bad experiences where people cause damage or problems. I've had some accidents happen where, something got dinged or damaged or broken, but it's all replaceable. I find that the folks that come and stay in my place are respectful of the surroundings, respectful of the neighborhood, and if they weren't, I would go and address it with them. You asked a question about rentals in other cities. I do also have one in Columbia. I bought it as a long-term rental. It didn't rent in time. I put it on Airbnb. I had many of the challenges, with living out of town, but they also have regulations that you have to have a permit, you have to abide by regulations, those things. So I've seen it both ways. But I will also tell you, when I travel, I try to stay in Airbnbs because I like to see how people live. I like to see something other than the inside of a hotel room. And I'm always respectful of those people's homes when I stay there as well. So thank you very much.
Got it, thank you. So I'm starting to pull a theme out here that active and engaged management is key if a vacation rental's going to be successful. Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, hi. I'm glad that got a chance to speak here. My name is Rani Siddiqui. I live in Alpharetta. I moved from Las Vegas, Nevada to here, where my children are grown up, educated, married, and gone their own homes. And I came here and I picked the place Alpharetta to live in, very nice community. And we enjoyed living here. We also have an HOA, but also coming here, I'm also a real estate broker, but with my back reasons, I could not practice anymore. But I need to finance myself, have some earning. I looked up into short-term rentals. I started in 2017 till the 2023 early this year, until the new HOA attorneys said no way. But the thing is, there are so many positives in short-term rentals. I see a lot of seniors like me. My children grown up, gone, and I am an empty nester, and I don't like it. I have a big house, and I have nobody except the walls to look at them, and they're so beautiful. How long? Don't you need people around you? I need people around me. So I found this is the way. I have people around me. I have 5-star rating all throughout. I have a full control of my guests. They are my guests. They're not people coming from anywhere. They've been well regulated by the companies. They've been already checked out. They have their own reviews. Without that, we don't take them. It's up to me who I take and who I don't. When their guests come in, I show them my house rules. No parties, no alcohol, no this and no that. They all follow the rules 100% to be in that place. They also know that we live in a community with people around me. They're not gonna make noises. One person in a room cannot make much of a noise anyway, okay? I don't allow parties. They don't park on the street. No violation whatsoever. We follow 100% of my community and my pride. And my guest is also my pride. I have not one, I have whole page of the comments positive towards short-term rental. I provide state with the tax dollars. I bring cleaning companies around, I give jobs to people. I have maintenance people on my list. I have gardeners on my list. I have to keep my property A1 condition to be a super host or 5-star rating. You just don't get anybody on the street in your home who doesn't know how to live. This is totally wrong. HOA, I respect my HOA, but this is butting in my business. My home is my business. Who is my guest, my relative, or somebody coming from my company who I trust that they can come to my house? Not everybody just walk in and come to my house, no. And moreover, I am a senior, I'm 75 plus. I'm the happiest person when I have people in my house, my guests. Guests are, for me, respectable people. They are not just whosoever. And don't expect them, just like you're talking, being in HOA board, I wish I'm there too. And I correct all of them. I don't know if you have children and you've been gone away or not, and you don't miss them. I do. Then I also have so many things that I abide my HOA. I'm enriching my community. I bring more jobs in the community. I bring more dollar to my state. What are you looking at? And being a busy lady, I don't have to have that many medications. I don't have to go all the way to the doctor. I'm depressed. I'm having anxiety. I'm down. I'm not. I'm full-fledged active person working at home. I cannot work here and there 8 hours on my feet, okay? And this is my homegrown business, and I respect and I get the respect. But HOA does not want to give respect just because it's a single family. It's still single family home. Don't you have guests in your homes? Do you doors shut all the time to everybody? Or do people, your neighbor, know who is coming to your house? Is your cousin, your mother, your brother, your sister, does everybody have to know it? You just all by yourself, one person? No, that's wrong.
So how about if I get your address and I'll come over and get some of that energy one of these mornings?
Yes, you should come.
I need to plug in to a little bit of that. So I can tell.
I have all positive happening with short-term rentals, and I'm sorry to say who are opposing him. If your own character, not giving people a love, you're not welcoming to other people, what are you expecting? If you don't give a smile, you don't get a smile. I learned here a lot of this area, especially it's a very nice area. I love to live here. But this HOA have put my financing down, keep me sad all the time. I have nothing but the walls to look at. Oh, this is so pretty, the picture. So what if it's pretty? I have nobody to smile at.
Thank you.
To say hello at.
We'd have to check with my wife to see what she would think about whether or not I wanted other people in the house.
It's okay. Well, she's already so I'm trying to hit.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of energy, and I like it. Where are we going next?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Dali. I am a short-term rental owner. I just wanted to talk about why I decided to do short-term rental. I raised my daughter in my house. I've owned it for 17 years. And I knew I wanted to move out the neighborhood because it became mostly renters. But I watched over the years how renters had destroyed other townhomes next to me. And I had renovated mine, and I did not want it to be destroyed. So I opted for short-term rental because I had control over maintaining it. The short-term renters tend to care more about the property than long-term renters. You get to go in after each renter, assess your property, make sure there's no damages, that it's well-maintained and things aren't destroyed. Where with long-term renters, where people are in it for a year or 2 years, I've seen my neighbor's property be destroyed to a point where they have to reinvest $30,000 just to get it up to par again, just to get their property in good condition. So I've been renting for 2 years, and the only thing that was ever damaged in my house was the garbage disposal, because somebody put bones in it. And the renters paid for it without a blink, right? So they just care. Short-term renters care a little bit more because it's their reputation as well as yours. They can't rent if they don't take care of the property. They can't rent if they are loud. Airbnb kicks them off of their platform. They can't rent if they break the rules. So I just trust it a little bit more than having long-term renters in my property. I tend to get really, like everyone else said, really nice people. The woman who's in my house right now is visiting because her son was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she came to stay so that she could be close to him while he goes through treatment. I had a family brought their kid in for surgery. I had golfers, father and son golfers, because, the area has a lot of golf courses. I had just, people who came for weddings. It's never like a party crowd. It's always, the couple before was an older couple who was retiring and wanted to come back to visit the community and look for a home. So it's really always like nice people, mellow people, not people that are gonna party and be loud and damage your property. So I hope I do not have to ever rent my property long-term and see it become destroyed with a long-term renter. So please consider that. We do take extra care. We have to have nice properties in order to maintain 5 stars. So, I hope you guys can really keep this going.
Great. Thank you for the comments. We'll work our way over here.
Yep.
We'll.
Going here.
We might have to take a vote if the guy in the Florida sweatshirt gets the mic or not. I'm not sure. The guy with the Braves hat, definitely. No, I'm just kidding. We're not like that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Joanna Martins. I'm also a short-term, I have 3 short-term rentals, and the reason I got into this was 3 years ago, I had a problem, water damaged my house, and then I was living with, I had my 2 elderly parents living with me, my daughter, who then was 5, 2 dogs, and my nephew, who's autistic, who does not do really well with a lot of change or close quarters. So hotel rooms were not options for us. We were displaced for 7 weeks, and we looked for a place in Alpharetta. Apartments wouldn't take dogs. We had so many different variables here. And we ended up having to go to Dunwoody and driving to the Alpharetta School District and back. And that's when I said, you know what, we need more options for people in situations like I was in, that my family was in, because in our situation, hotels were not going to be feasible, not even because of the expense, but because of our circumstances. Since then, we've invested in 3 units. Every single one of them were homes that needed significant improvement, total guts. We just remodeled everything. And most of our clients are people like in my situation then. I have one client right now that's been in my home for 4 months, water damage. I had a client that was there for 3 months, just left because we have a contract with a company that brings people from South Africa to work here in Alpharetta. And it's our 3rd transferee from South Africa. We have people, so our clients are people who are living in Alpharetta, and people who are building homes, who are being transferred, people who have water damage. These are the people who live in who either are being transferred or who are living in our community. So these are not transient people who are just going to be here partying and leaving. Yes, I do get some guests that are for a week or 2, but the majority are people like in the situation that I found myself in, or corporate transfers. So these people have kids, have dogs. Outside of Airbnb, I don't see an option for these people, how to comfortably transition in their circumstances. So that's why I see such a big need for Airbnbs or short-term rentals like a lot of us here provide to the community.
Thank you. Yes, sir. We need to get...
Where are you going?
Right here.
Oh, sorry, missed him.
My name's Pete Roskam. I actually live in Milton, so I apologize if I'm a bit out of place here. I am a homeowner. I am not a short-term rental person, but I do support the idea of it, or at least that it should not be made illegal. Some other folks have brought up a point that I think is important. We've all taken vacations before we travel, and we stay in a hotel or in a traditional bed and breakfast or an Airbnb type situation. And I would urge you to consider the question of, do you think of yourself as a detriment to that community when you are there? Or do you behave in a way that is actually, fits in well? I would think the majority of people fall into that category. And so I would say there are always bad actors that exist in any significantly large population of people. And so to the extent that somebody comes to a neighborhood and engages in criminal activity or civil violations or what have you, I believe that's precisely what law enforcement is for, or code enforcement, or whatever the exact issue is. And so I would hope that we not throw the baby out with the bathwater on this and consider the whole scope of things, the good and the bad. So I guess that's a philosophical point to make. I think there's an economic one that's kind of interesting. I don't know who is as nerdy about this as I am, but today the 30-year mortgage hit 8%, 30-year fixed mortgage. And I checked on the numbers. In Alpharetta in August, the median home price for sale was $725,000. And that payment comes out to around $4,400 a month if you put 20% down at 8%. That is not what most people would call affordable. And prices would have to drop a whole heck of a lot for that to become affordable at 8%. A good amount of the buyers that we have right now are cash buyers. And that may seem like it is a disadvantage if you're a buyer in our housing market, but it's also, if you're a homeowner, that's actually putting a bit of a ceiling or a bit of a floor beneath our home values, that there are buyers because we are a desirable community and there are people currently able to short-term rent, for example. And I just want you to imagine if you were to put in an ordinance to make this illegal in the city, you're getting rid of a good chunk of the buyers in today's high interest rate market, and you're putting in a bunch of sellers because now they can't do what they're doing. That's downward pressure on a housing market, and it's something to consider. And unless interest rates actually fall and become affordable, those housing prices are going to have to fall a very long way before ordinary people who have to finance can actually step into that market. So it's something to consider. Food for thought.
Thank you for that. And before we get to the next comment, let me just quickly respond to that one because, and I'll respond to it not in the context of where we're going, but we have not, and I don't anticipate a discussion on attempting to just say no short-term vacation rentals. They are simply outlawed in Alpharetta. I don't think we can do that. So our discussion today and into the future will be, to what level does Alpharetta attempt to regulate short-term vacation rentals? A lot or a little, I don't know. But I don't think one of those regulatory options is a simple preemption. So I'll just throw that out there, that I don't think the law necessarily allows for that. Representative Martin.
Yeah, and thanks, Chris. I want to be brief. I just want to tell you, it was great it's been great to live here my whole life. I lived just outside of here, lived in the house I've lived in since 1992, was fortunate enough to serve with actually Doug at one time before in mayor. And I get chills every time I come back to a city hall like this. I've served down the state for 22 years next January, and with the angst in politics and all that going on, I'm just proud to be in Alpharetta and hear people that are on different sides of things have a conversation. That's all I really got to add to this, is how proud I am about people that have different things to bring up about it. And some serious thoughts on it, some passion into it. And Doug and Mayor Gilvin was here. I saw Councilmember Hypes, Chris, to allow for this kind of discussion to be had and, come to a good solution, because there are people that are hauling this down to the state capitol. And I'll tell you what you don't want to do is you don't want to have 180 House members and 56 senators making that decision, a one-size-fits-all for the state of Georgia. So I appreciate you guys being here, and I'm proud to be a native Alpharetta, and where people can talk and have different views on things and get something good accomplished for our community.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Holmes. I live here in downtown Alpharetta and have been here for 30 years. I don't have a short-term rental here in this community. I came here literally just to listen in. I don't have a dog in the fight per se. But to pick up on the point that Representative Martin just said, I do own a short-term rental in a different community up in Blue Ridge. And I'll say that experience I've lived sort of both sides of the discussion tonight. I mean, I consider myself like every other short-term rental owner here. Believe me, I live this idea of we take great care in making sure that we are good neighbors. In fact, you know, one of the things that I made a point to do when we first started to put our home on the short-term rental market up there was, because we live in an area, it's on a lake, but it's surrounded by full-time residents, most of whom retired. I am very sensitive to not being that neighbor that's getting the phone calls or whatever. And so I just made a point to go over and introduce myself and say, this is who I am, this is what we're doing. I want you to feel free, and I want you to call me if there's ever any issues, and I'll be there in a heartbeat. And thankfully, it hasn't happened yet. But to me, it's to the point that was just made about a conversation. I'd like to think that our community is different than a Fort Lauderdale or a 30A, where you know, this is not a vacation destination, and that at the very least, if any of us are having issues with a short-term rental or a long-term renter for that matter, that we should walk over, pick up the phone, have a conversation with the owner of the property or the renter, and see if you can work it out, first of all, right? Because I realize that may be idealistic, but I would venture to say that in a lot of cases, those kind of things can be worked out. And my final point is just simply, I don't even know what regulations are being discussed or not discussed. It doesn't really affect me per se, because I'm in an HOA that doesn't allow them either way. But I'll say that, you know, I would be in favor of something that would sort of hold the owners of those properties accountable. And so if you're going to have issues, I mean, everyone might have one or two sort of, you know, things that go wrong. But if it becomes a repetitive thing where a homeowner is not being responsible for enforcing the rules that they have, then there ought to be some ability by the city or some other enforcement agency to say, we're going to take away your right to do that. And so to me, that would be an effective use of a regulation as opposed to an outright ban.
It sounded like that was sort of a full circle, so yeah.
So I've been listening attentively to all of the discussion back and forth. I think that every single person in this room who is a short-term rental person is a good person, is a responsible Airbnb person, and has every right to conduct business. What I'm here for is to advocate that the City of Alpharetta impose regulations that will protect the residents against the bad Airbnb short-term rental people who are not responsible, and will also back up the multitude of HOAs that are here in Alpharetta, that we want the city to have our back, to say, hey, if the HOA prohibits short-term rentals or rentals of any kind, then the ordinances in the city will back us up so that we're not left hung up to dry on our own to fight these battles. So I don't think anybody is saying that we want to outlaw short-term rentals. I don't think that's the discussion at all. That's correct. The discussion is, what should our city do to govern, to regulate in some fashion? That's all.
We're going here, and then I'm going to start working the other side of the room.
Great.
Yeah, just say this issue is it's not in a vacuum, and this is not unique to Alpharetta. I mean, other cities are certainly facing the same exact.
True. Yes.
I would like us to consider what the City of Atlanta has recently passed, their ordinance that they've adopted and is now effective, officially known as City of Atlanta Short-Term Rental Ordinance.
That's a creative title.
And just for the record, it's ordinance 20-O-1656.
Okay.
The gist of that is that you get two properties. You get your primary residence and one other property. So from what everybody's saying here, these owner-operators are not the problem. These people they're doing excellent jobs, the owner-operators. What's going to be the problem, what is the problem and is going to be much worse, is you're going to have these LLCs and private equity come in from out of town, and they're going to buy up 15, 20, 30 of these properties, and they're not going to have skin in the game like these people here that are talking, owner-operators. These people are going to be somewhere else. They're not going to care. It's a cash, it's a business, it's what they went to MBA school for, is to milk this property for as much as they can get, and they're not going to care about who's living next to it, what the street it's on, or anything about it. It's going to be an item in their book. So I think the trick here is, yes, these people, you run your business, you owner-operators, but there's got to be a limit to it. You, just like Atlanta says, you get your property and you get one more. You have to stop the private equities, the LLCs coming in from outside and grabbing up vast swaths of this, because every time a house is going to come up for sale in this town, they're going to nail it. Cash offer, they're coming in because they're going to be able to make more money off of this property as a short-term rental instead of renting it out as a normal property.
Actually, we're going to go here. Let her respond. Okay. Hey, go ahead. Right behind you. I'm going to put you to work.
Okay, I wanted to respond to that because you were mentioning limiting it to one Airbnb, and I have two, and I know I have two. I have my primary residence, and then I have two Airbnbs, and I just wanted to. And I know some other people in here have also said like they have like 7 or 8 units back there and stuff. It's not always LLCs. The reason I have two is because I have 2 boys, and I envision in the future each of them having one of those homes so they can raise their family here, because I never want them to leave me, because I feel like you do. They're little still, but I'm like freaking out about them leaving already. But I just feel like that gets to be pretty dangerous, telling people how many homes they can own, and because it seems really overbearing, and people should be able to buy however many homes they can afford.
Okay.
The Atlanta ordinance addresses, you live here, you have skin in the game. What they're addressing is people from out of town. The larger private equities coming in and buying off big swaths of this. That's going to be the problem. Not you guys that have skin in the game that live here. I'm sure that there will be some sort of accommodation for you live here and you got your property. It's going to be the larger companies coming in, buying these on cash deals, and then you're not going to have a neighborhood anymore. You're going to have house after house after house, which is going to be people coming in and out down your whole street. I live on Jane Ellen Way. Been here for 20 years. We've got 5 short-term rentals on the street now, and I know every time one of those houses is going to come up for sale, somebody's going to buy them, and it's going to be another one, and another one, another one, and then the street is not a residential street anymore. It's a hotel, and it's not going to be bought by people who live on that street or people in Alpharetta. It's going to be bought by out-of-towners who are going to buy these as investments and have no stake and no skin in the game in Alpharetta because they do not live here.
Thank you. And just as we'll certainly, I've heard Jane Ellen a couple times. We don't have a short-term vacation rental ordinance in place now, but if you all have, and if it happens to be things that are going on that the city has some ability to interject itself into, it will. Of course, we can't interject ourselves just because we might want to. We have to have the ability to, but we'll follow up with the Jane Ellen 5 at a later date beyond just this session. Sir.
Well, there's another for sale sign, there's another for lease sign, and I'm guaranteeing you it will be the same person that will come and buy these. So pretty soon I'll be a stranger in my own neighborhood.
Understood.
That's what I'm afraid of. If you own your, okay, so on your street, if someone has 5 in a row and you don't like that, well, I don't like a lot of things about it, but I'm
Okay.
concerned that every penny I own is in that house, and pretty soon if LLCs, they can bust an LLC and bankrupt it once they've got all the money out of it. It's just they'll sell it to some big developer who will go do whatever and sit there because that's how they make a living. But I'm concerned that it destroys the fabric of the neighborhood, because then no little family is going to buy a house to raise their kids next door to 5 rentals. So now it's only the investors who are going to buy in the neighborhood. We've got doctors, CEOs, plumbers, house painters. We are that swath of the 1970s where everybody lived together, who made $50,000 and $1 million, and they're all neighbors. And I saw that. And so now the plumbers are cashing out, and the CEOs are too good to live there. And then now it's going to become just, I'm living in the middle of rental hell. Short term's not really the problem. I'd rather have a bad short-term neighbor that's going to go with me. I thought it was that. I was like, why can't she own my next door neighbor's house?
live on Jane Ellen.
Because it would be great, but I'm afraid of what happens when it goes south. I know a lot of people are.
So we need to get back on the microphones. Let's get this comment here, then we'll see if this.
Hi, everybody. My name is Derek Harper. My wife and I have lived here pretty much all our lives. I moved from Tennessee down to Marietta when I was 3. So we lived here almost 60 years. I'm actually a licensed real estate agent with the #1 Keller Williams office in the world right here in Alpharetta. I also own a property management brokerage, and I manage about 90 rental homes in the metro Alpharetta and area in the cities that connect it. So I come from the sales and long-term rental background, and I came here, I think, with an open mind, just wanting to know more about the other side and how that's affecting people in neighborhoods, because we are seeing that happen in some of our HOAs. I own long-term rental properties, my wife and I. And I agree with a lot of what people are saying on both sides. I see it in my long-term rentals with institutional investors coming in. They don't care at all about what happens. They'll squeeze as much profit as they can out of it. They don't take good care of the properties. They depend on the HOA to be their police, to tell them, when their property needs service. We try to do it a little different. We put very good tenants in our properties. We have a heavy screening process. And I think the one thing I'm getting a lot of is that Airbnb kind of has a really good process and a screening process, and that rating process that does ensure that the people that are coming to live in these properties are a higher standard of people than you would get in some of these other situations and some of these other properties. I'm not against short-term rentals. I'm against the market being flooded with any kind of long-term or short-term, or a neighborhood being flooded with it, because of a lot of the reasons that a lot of people have brought up. I think it would be good to have it regulated. I think Airbnb's platform, actually, anybody could learn a lot from that about how to regulate even short-term rentals. So I just want to see nice people, good people coming in, going, and for whatever reason they come and go for. I don't mind that. I've got neighbors that do that. I've got people that work from all over the world that come in here, just like other people are saying, for just short terms to work on a project. So they're not the kind of people that can rent even a year from me. They need a place to go, and they're going to be here for 30, 60, 90 days. They don't want to be in a hotel for 30, 60, 90 days. We just need a balance, I think. And I agree with both sides. I see the negatives. I understand the negatives. I've had the $20,000 reno on a property where a tenant moved out that'd been there for 4 or 5 years and wrecked it. It wasn't one that I managed. I took it over for the owner. But I see all sides of it. I think there's a solution that can make everybody happy.
Hopefully, at the end of this process, we will have successfully found that middle ground. We got to get over to this side of the room, and then we'll come back to you. But we haven't been over here in a while, so.
Thanks for your patience.
Hi. I've been fortunate to live here for 11 years. I'm both a resident and property owner in Alpharetta. I was originally a pediatric occupational therapist, and after going through a very difficult divorce, I realized that I needed to do something else to increase my earnings to support my 2 kids and I. So I basically took all the equity of my home and I put it into a rental property that I could own. A short-term rental. I have now been doing this for 2 years. I've been able to leave my my therapy job, and I'm hosting exclusively. I now have 4 short-term rental homes in the area, and I'm a 5-star super host. I've had over 200 stays. Never once have I had a problem. I know my neighbors. They know me. They know that it's a short-term rental. If there was ever to be a problem, they have my direct phone line to contact me, to let me know. But that has never been a problem because on these booking platforms, Airbnb and Vrbo, like other people have said, you want to be a 5-star host. You want to. This is my properties. I own them. I've put all my money and resources into these homes. These are very important for me. I would never want them to go and be ruined, right? So I'm constantly checking on my properties, and I only allow 5-star guests in my homes. And I think you'll find that from a lot of these super hosts that are out there as well. This is their investment. These are their homes that they own, so they don't want them to get ruined. But in addition, I wanted to bring up the tax portion because we do pay hotel and occupancy tax to the city. In the last 2 years, I've paid $47,000 or contributed to $47,000 in hotel tax to the City of Alpharetta through my rentals. So again, restricting and putting a lot of things would also affect those economic benefits that the city obtains from that. There's a study by Economic Policy Resources that shows that short-term rentals have been proven to contribute significantly to the local economies. For every $100 spent on lodging, an additional $67 is spent on goods and services in our community. And again, when I have guests, I love to, there's a whole hospitality aspect to it where where should I go to eat dinner? And I love it because, I'm such an advocate of downtown Alpharetta and Avalon and all our wonderful places to go and eat and dine and enjoy and entertainment. And so I love to be able to recommend these local spots to all my guests. And I love to have local Valor coffee in my homes that I provide. And, and so there's just a lot of that sort of benefit to the city, I believe, in these short-term rentals that I guess not everybody may think about. I do believe that there's ways to license short-term rentals without stifling entrepreneurship. I believe that, like somebody else had mentioned, there's noise detectors. We have video ring cameras, which I have in all my properties. I make sure that there's only a certain number of guests. So there's certain things that can be done to make sure that there's safe environment for neighbors and guests alike. So that's what I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, there she is. Well, I'll tell you what, let me go there and then I'm going to come down here.
We'll come around for a couple seconds and go ahead.
All right, Rhonda Hofer. I've been a resident here in Alpharetta for 14 years. I also sell real estate here. I came also with an open mind like the gentleman. I think that the city is doing a good thing of being proactive instead of reactive. And one of my questions was, what was the goal of the city? You said you had a workshop that spurred this. I think you answered that for me. One of my questions is, and then I have a couple comments, but one of my questions is what percentage of the 300 estimated short-term rentals, is that a 1% for the city of Alpharetta? Is that a 10% ownership? Like, what percent is the 300 houses that you think you have here operating as a short-term rental for the city of Alpharetta?
How many single-family homes we have in Alpharetta, Kathy? Because it'll be just a simple. Yeah, what's just if single-family residential? What's a ballpark number? $28,000. So 300 of 28,000. So that would be the easiest way to do just a simple math problem. So that's total houses in Alpharetta, and you're asking what percentage is?
It's about 1%.
That's housing units, so it includes
dwelling units.
Okay, and is there somewhere there's a highest concentration? Like, is there, when you did this research, was there a high concentration? I'm assuming that's going to be close to downtown, but.
I haven't looked at a heat map of it. Did you see a heat map of it, Brett? Is there any, can you Yeah, was there any conclusion that you could draw as to location?
It was pretty broad across the city, but downtown was a little bit more. You could definitely see where the HOA areas were. That was the lessened areas of them.
Okay. So I also live in a non-HOA area, an older area of the home that is non-HOA. We have somebody in our house that's in our neighborhood that's very good at calling when the grass is too high and when your car is not parked appropriately. So there are already rules in the city for guidelines for maintaining your home that, whoever said the largest HOA is the City of Alpharetta. We see that in our neighborhood by the neighbors just calling to make sure that the housing was there. But again, I appreciate you being reactive, but I do believe in personal property rights. I also use Airbnbs and vacation by owners when I go elsewhere. And the main reason that we do that is because we go with our dogs who are our family. We have no children, so our dogs become our family. And we usually meet other people from where we came from. So we usually vacation with those that we left back home. And so we'll get an Airbnb so our families can join together and spend the whole week together instead of going to a separate room every night and sitting there and watching TV till whatever. We can get into our pajamas and put puzzles together or socialize or have a glass of wine. So that's a lot of reason why we use an Airbnb. And we do have the 5-star rating as users of Airbnb, and we're very good to leave it. And I think most of you have said that about your rentals. So I just want to point out we have to consider that there are people as we age that are going to possibly need to use the resources of a basement to rent out or maybe an auxiliary building as we're considering what we're going to do about this moving forward as a city. And then I don't think we can really limit personal property rights by saying you can only own 2 properties in the city of Alpharetta. You're telling somebody that they can't create wealth income. And then somebody mentioned they wanted the city to govern the HOAs. I can tell you there's a rule right now for 10% cap of long-term rentals in the city of Alpharetta, and that's I'm sure 10% has exceeded. There's no way for the city to govern that. The only way they can govern it is have the HOAs govern it themselves. But when you have a neighborhood with no HOA, you're seeing places like I don't want to say Avalon, but Avansong. I can tell you that's probably at least 50% rentals in that neighborhood. And so there's no way to govern and ask the city to police other than to put in some regulations like if you don't maintain, you don't get your permit for the next year. There's no way for them to go around and police each and every bed and breakfast in HOA, or sorry, I keep saying HOA, but Airbnb.
Yeah. Let me respond to that real quickly, just because I do want to make sure we continue to draw the distinction through the evening of the difference between just renting your house and having a short-term vacation rental. And the purpose of tonight's conversation is around the concept of short-term vacation rental. I'll also point out that Avansong is in Milton. So just to keep the record clear, go ahead.
Well, again, I think from a big picture standpoint, some of the key words that are being glossed over here is majority, most, and responsible. And for those of you that are in the majority and then are responsible, more power to you. Let me be a little more graphic about the minority and the ones that aren't responsible and participate in the challenges of the short-term rentals. We're told to call the neighbors are told to call the police. They call the police. 2 hours later, they call the police. 2 hours later, they call the police. It's almost every weekend. It's a different group in the same 2 houses that are side by side in the same neighborhood. Then we get the great joy of them going on the lake on their boat and see them pole dance. And if that isn't enough, then sometimes they get off and they get on the golf course in their G-strings and they're doing cartwheels. The owner doesn't care, but the neighbors did. It's not what we buy into when we get an HOA. We call the police, and with all respect to the police, they come out there and nothing ultimately happens. This has been going on for years. This isn't a week thing, a month thing. This has been going on for years. It just gets pretty tiring. all the way around. It's not fair to the homeowners that live there, that have to listen to it, that the whole cul-de-sac is filled up with cars. They can't even drive around there. If there's a solution to stop that, great. And if there's responsible, what can be put into it, great. But it isn't happening. In the Alpharetta police, as great as they are, they're not able to put a fork in it. And the police are fed up with them as well.
Right. So that sounds like a very specific example. Why don't you text me those addresses? Because did you? Okay, cool. As long as you give it to somebody. I didn't ask the police to stop by tonight. They were probably curious as to why the lights were on this late. So, and I purposefully didn't have them in the room because I didn't want this to turn into a put the police on the spot conversation. So if you'll just text me the addresses, and if you texted them to the mayor as well, that sounds specifically focused enough. I don't know, you might have advertised where people are going to go have their Friday night happy hour. I don't know. So okay, do you have a direct question for Ed? Suggestion. Let's go with suggestion, then we'll go to Craig. Let's go to the attorney, yes. I'm not having to pay for this. This is cool.
Have you found the listing on any of the short-term rental platforms?
But they self-do. One of them has a website.
Okay, but so nothing comes through Airbnb or VRBO?
It's the self-dealers. It's the minority.
Okay, because I was going to say you can also contact the platforms to report them that they're not operating properly, but so that, yeah, sorry, but I tried.
It is. I'm starting to.
So that's all great for the reputable operators.
Craig, go ahead.
So
Let's
my
get
name
this
is
coming from Craig. Then we'll bring the microphone over to you. Go ahead.
My name is Craig Johnson. I've lived in Windward, Alpharetta for almost 13 years. I'm retired. I'm a retired businessman. I've started businesses. I've done private equity. I've been involved in private equity for about 25 years. Have raised lots and lots of money before. I've been a landlord since 1983. It's a good business. I provide housing to people who wish to rent because they can't own or don't want to own. It gives them a place to live in a residential neighborhood. They live in a residential neighborhood. That's what a residential neighborhood is. Daily and weekly business is a very good business. It's a very profitable business. I've considered doing it myself. I've considered I'm on an advisory board to a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm, international, and I've considered going to them and asking them for $20, $30, $40, $50 million to buy up a bunch of houses in a place that I'll not go into, but, well, the lake. And I know that the cash flows from those would be pretty good, and we can outbid anybody else in buying those properties with such good cash flows. That's why it's such a good business. That's why you don't rent. Most people convert over to the short-term rentals. They can make more money doing it that way with the short-term rentals if you got a good seasonal or otherwise good business opportunity there. I'm glad that the owners that some owners are good, responsible operators and use best practices. It sounds like everybody in this room who is doing this is a good, responsible operator. We even have one who is on the property 24/7. Well, that's not what this is all about. You know, if you have somebody coming and staying with you at your house and you're charging them to rent a room, you're watching them, you know, that's not going to, what are the chances of that being a problem? The problem is when you have the unwatched, you've got the monitors on your places, you've got all these techniques for making sure nobody messes with your property and does a bad job. But what are all the others doing? What are the ones doing that are letting the parties happen once a week or once a month and they're trashing the neighborhood? These places are basically unregulated mini motels. They are a commercial operation, but they have no staff on site to control problems. You know, in a hotel or a motel, when the person in the next room starts doing something outrageous, somebody comes up from the front desk and says, hey, knock it off or get out. That doesn't happen with these kinds of properties. It just goes on until the end of the rental. All right? Residential neighborhoods are for living in, not visiting. Daily and weekly lodging is not residing, it is visiting. It is visiting. It is hotel motel business. It is a commercial business. It changes the neighborhood around it negatively. It is a profitable business, but much of that profit comes at the detriment to others around it. The owners in this room are good and practice best practices, but not all owners are good. That's true for long-term rentals as well as short-term rentals. Some are bad and hurt the community. So how do we assure that all are good renters, good owners? Because that's the problem. It's not you guys in this room who talk about all these great things you do to make sure that your units are not problems. And you know what? I probably would not have any concern about your units being next to me, because it sounds like you all do all the things that are necessary, especially you, because you're there. You're there. But I'll bet you none of the other of these great owners here are on site 24/7. So how do we make sure? Zoning serves a purpose. It separates uses. We have commercial zones where motels and hotels are allowed. We have residential zones where people live, not visit. They live. They visit you, well, your home, and as your guest, but there are neighborhoods that are designed for people to live in, not to use as mini hotels, miniature hotels. So how do we protect our residential communities from becoming miniature hotel streets? Short-term residential should be in commercial zones. And if you look at the heat map, I've not done so, but I would not be surprised if they tend to be close to where people making short-term visits would care, because it's an alternative to a hotel or a motel. So you're going to want to be close to the thing you're coming to visit. You might be visiting family, in which case it's a whole nother, you don't quite fall into that pattern of being near downtown or near some other location. Obviously, we have a lot of places where there's a recreational draw, and those places, they naturally also fit into the idea perhaps of being, having a lodging kind of an option available. But most places people are living there, and they are not expecting their next door unit to be a hotel room.
Got it. Okay. Come over here. Thank you. I promise I've seen your hand. We're going to come here, and then we're coming back to here, even though the guy next to you has a Florida shirt on.
Where am I going? Where am I going?
Right over here. With the lady that has the 4 rentals. Then she's forgotten. So now we're coming over here. You got lucky. Here we're coming over here. As he's walking, we'll just say, "Go Dogs."
Okay.
Hi. I just want to talk about, we've been talking a lot about community, and there's a lot of negatives that are being brought up about short-term rentals with community, and I just wanted to bring a couple points today. I live on Cold Creek, which is walking distance from here. That's where Mariana has a short-term rental. I have an 8-year-old that is running up and down that street, that cul-de-sac, it's unsupervised with all her little friends. I've never had any issues with any of her guests, and I live on the street with her short-term rental, and the reason I'm here today actually is because I did mention that I had somebody living at one of my units for 4 months. Well, my daughter goes to fine arts performing theater class with their kid. And my guest picked up my daughter at school at the class and is keeping her until this meeting is over. So my guest at my short-term rental is babysitting my daughter. So talk about forming communities and friendships. And my other guest, because of our friendship, put her daughter into the same school that my daughter goes to, same Montessori school. So there's a lot of the positives that go around too with getting to know your guests and a lot of the community that's made, because these are people who many times are already in your community. You're just having the opportunity to meet them, and many times they become family. So I just wanted to bring up the positive side of the community as well.
Great, thank you.
I feel like I've heard everybody who owns a short-term rental talk about how it's benefited them, and it's benefited, maybe larger parts of the community. But the fact of the matter is, you've opened a business and you make money. That's why you do it. But you've opened a business next to our homes. And my question is the city okay if I open a business in my house and I sell cut flowers, and then the person who lives next to me opens a daycare, and the person next to them opens a bakery, and we all live in a residential neighborhood? How is that governed?
Yeah, so there's not a simple I can't draw an analogy for you that's a simple black and white to say, yes, that would be okay. Cut flowers is great, bakery's okay, restaurant's not okay. This notion of short-term vacation rental is an area in the law that's just not terribly clear at this point. And it's not nearly as clear as uses allowed by right, or uses allowed conditionally, or uses just not allowed based upon zoning. And there's not a perfect answer to your question, but that's partly why we're here, is because there's that ambiguousness, and candidly, I don't want to test the law by making law, because I really don't want all of us to have to afford to do that. And that's why a lot of communities have put some regulations in place that cause these types of uses to cohabitate without them being nuisances. And so that's really what we're talking about, is how we find a middle ground where everybody gets along. Your situation on Jane Ellen, your situation with the basement, and those are definitely some stories of not positive experiences with vacation rentals, and I'd like to talk with you further to see if we can help even long before we get to the finish line with whatever we do here. But there's not a great black and white answer to your question.
Can you just define nuisance?
I could if I had a book that I could go and tell you what the law said, but I don't want to quote the law without actually having it in front of me. But there is a definition of a nuisance in our city code of ordinances. Now I got all sorts of hands, so let's do this.
She remembered her question, then I'll come over here.
I think it gets dicey when you are going to differentiate so much between a long-term rental versus a short-term rental, because, you know, as property owners, you can say, yeah, it's okay that you rent it over a year, but it's not okay that you rent it for 30 days or 6 weeks, or it just gets really dicey as far as, you know, constitutional rights are concerned. That's my concern with that.
I don't know that I agree with you, but good comment. But I'm not sure that I necessarily agree. Where else were we going here?
This is really close. I could say a lot, but there is a place in zoning for what we're talking about. It's called mixed use, and I'm an expert at it. And it can be for the businesses and residential and for purchase to all live together, but we're talking about things that are zoned for residential, period. So that's the distinction I wanted. It's not mixed use.
Understand.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go over there. She hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll go there.
Thank you. My name is Frankie Elliott. I'm with the Atlanta Realtor Association. I have a comment and a question. Let me start. My question is, in this ordinance, the proposed ordinance that was reviewed earlier, it requires a conditional use permit, and it limits it to ag zoning. So I'm curious to find out why those two provisions are in it, or if there's a specific reason why those two are in there. And then the other thing I just want to mention is a couple of things. Regardless of you're talking about a short-term rental, a long-term rental, or home ownership, any and all of this comes down to how well the city can enforce it. Mm-hmm. You can have very similar problems with parking from people who own property versus if it's a short-term or long-term rental. So that's, in reviewing this ordinance, there are some pretty significant enforcement penalties in place as proposed in the ordinance. So it always will come down to, regardless of what you're talking about, it's always going to come down to enforcement. And then the second thing
Can I address that before you go on, though, just so we don't get lost on that topic? So what you saw, if you would have gone to our workshop agenda, was an example of an ordinance that was a conglomeration of some research that had been done in ordinances around the area. I would not get sucked into the fact that that was a proposed first ordinance that would ever be presented for adoption, but we had to start this discussion somewhere.
Okay.
So just know that, you know, I could answer why there was a cup in there, and I can answer why it was, sort of recommended that the zoning designation was agricultural, and I can talk about why some of the different requirements were in that ordinance. It was just a springboard, and we're a long way from anything that would ever ever be adopted. So I just wanted to, for anybody playing along, don't get sucked into this proposed ordinance because it's truly not proposed at this point.
Okay, no, that's a problem. And I understand where, and I know where it came from, so I understand why those conditions were in that particular ordinance. But the other thing I just want to mention, when you license these as a jurisdiction, one of the real benefits that benefits everyone is the jurisdiction now has a way to make sure taxes are collected on that rental. So they are required to pay the Georgia tourism tax, I think is the name of it. So there is a mechanism in place once these individuals register with the platforms that now those taxes are being collected, the appropriate taxes that they have to pay. And I'll tell you, I totally understand people's concern about these in neighborhoods, et cetera, but there are plenty of examples of successful businesses that are run out of people's houses every day. So just thank you. My bigger question was really on the cup, and if that's just a starting point, then that's fine.
Yeah, well,
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We'll go back
I just want to say, calling them short-term vacation rentals isn't necessarily a correct label. I would say short-term rentals because somebody mentioned before, Alpharetta isn't exactly a tourist destination. It's not like Nashville or Las Vegas or something like that. The majority of people coming to Alpharetta are relocating. They are coming to visit family. They're coming for job interviews. They're coming for, weddings and things like that. So I don't think that calling them short-term vacation rentals is correct. I think they should be referred to as short-term rentals.
Okay, that's good feedback. I draw a nuance in the difference when short-term vacation rentals doesn't sound as much like hotel as short-term rental does to me. And that's why I think the word vacation might be important in that definition. Craig, be quick.
So I would agree, and I would say, contrary to my previous comments, or seemingly contrary, I am completely in favor of these short-term housing options being made available, as long as they are in the proper zoning area, not in residential areas. And I agree with you that using the term vacation rental is misleading. These are temporary lodgings, like a hotel. You are lodging. You have lodging for a few days or a week or two for a visit for some purpose, business, visiting family, whatever. It might be for vacation, and there are vacation rentals, of course, in places usually that are a vacation destination.
Sure, understood.
It's lodging, temporary lodging.
It's going to take me a second to get to our next speaker.
Well, before anything else, I just want to say that I'm very glad to see everyone coming together to, analyzing both sides of the coin here to get to a common ground. The only thing I would ask the City of Alpharetta is, whenever coming with those regulations that we're trying to create here, please don't take the City of Atlanta as an example, because it is the worst. Oh gosh, a 5-year-old could have written a better enforcement to it. As a matter of fact, it's been so bad they haven't been able to pass it since March last year. By the way, it's been kept being postponed, and it's just I think it's never going to be up. By the way, real quick, especially since you're talking about that, Craig, how would you actually suggest that some of those short-term rentals would be placed in commercial zones? The main reason I'm asking is because many people have, for example, rent their basement or their guest bedroom. So how would they do that? Being able to achieve that?
Well, there are a lot of areas where it's mixed use or you have commercial use that already allows hotels, and these are an alternative to a hotel or a motel. They're essentially motels because you can drive up to them and stay there with your car and all that. They should be in the zones that are allowed for that kind of business, where you can operate. If you can operate a hotel there or a motel there in that neighborhood, then you should be allowed to operate one of these daily or weekly lodging businesses. And if it's a residential neighborhood, that's not the right place for it. It's outside of the proper location. It's in a location. Yeah, they are. So you have to make a decision whether. So then you have to make a decision whether you grandfather the ones that are in, or the people reinvest their money in the proper location.
Thank you for the comments. So let's come down here. Let me grab this comment, and then I want to spend a couple minutes summarizing what I've heard for the group. And so we'll come to this comment, then I'll give a quick summary and we'll see where we go from there. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity. I've heard a lot of comments. By the way, my full appreciation to every one of us here who are owners of short-term rental properties and are responsible, impassioned, caring, on it and taking good care of your properties. Thank you, because you're what we really wish would be the case all the time. We're here for those cases where it's not the case. I've heard comments about HOAs and where they fit in terms of governing what kind of short-term rental controls should be in place. Just a point, HOAs are not one size fits all. It depends on when the community was constituted and whether they were instituted as a POA or an HOA. Older ones are always going to be HOAs. POAs have very, very different properties, controls, abilities to enforce. They can build things into usage restrictions and actually put teeth in it that an HOA may not necessarily be able to. I can tell you in the case of the Windward community, the only thing that's in our rules and regulations defers entirely to city ordinances for control of rental of any duration. So it's not been on our radar to even try to control it. When you think about the overhead that would be involved in doing that, licensing, inspections, collecting taxes, it would drive the HOA's overhead through the roof. I don't believe that we would have the ability to do that. So at this point, because we already defer to any controls the city might have in place, we figure at this point that it's only at the city level that these types of functions could actually exist with any success.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that distinction. So what have we, number one, a couple people have said it. I want to say it too. It's been a long time since I've been able to be in a room with differing viewpoints that stayed this friendly, this cordial, this productive. I'm used to having one color t-shirt over here, a different color t-shirt over here, all sorts of applause. If you ever decide that you're going to come in dressed in the same t-shirt, I wear a double X. I'd like to add one to my collection. I have a whole collection of t-shirts that have been worn in public forums. So I just want to say thank you for keeping a cordial, open mind, wanting to invest in your community, because you've now spent an hour and 50 minutes with us tonight. You can tell from the conversation, at least I can tell from this conversation, we're far from making a recommendation as to where our finish line is. But what I did learn tonight is I learned that there are a lot of people that need to be a part of this discussion to get good information to now what remains of 2 elected officials in the room, but collectively this council, if a recommendation is going to come forward that the city adopting the ordinances. Themes I've heard tonight. I've heard that what makes a good, successful short-term rental is a 5-star host. And I didn't even know there was necessarily such a thing as a 5-star host, but the more actively managed, the more, the closer the owners are to the locations, the better it's going to function. I also recognize that there's a theme that we're going to have some people that unfortunately just stay as bad actors that rent their location. It's more about money than it is about what is the result of what that means to a neighborhood. And we'll follow back up with these couple of neighborhoods through our code group to see if there's anything else that we can key in on that might be able to provide some relief. So let me just reiterate the fact that we did have the one council discussion on it. I wasn't provided any direction other than go talk to people. And so please stay actively engaged with us on this topic. I keep moving and that keeps giving them fits with that camera. You don't have to focus on me, it's okay. But you know, we're a ways off from getting to where we need to be to make a recommendation. I'm going to look to our staff right now and say we've had a lot of dialogue tonight. Kathy, you've taken good notes. Molly, taking good notes. Productive use of time. And so, do either of you have anything to that you would want to mention at this point, or are you satisfied with
No, I mean, I
what
think
you've learned?
This was great. I mean, this was great feedback, and we'll work together and bring, a draft and talk to the group.
Okay. So what I can assure you with is you leave here, because sometimes you come to these meetings at City Hall and you're like, okay, well, that was a box checked. And what I want to tell you is that tonight was not a box checked. It was a box of many boxes that need to be checked before we get to a point of bringing something to the city council. So please, nobody leave here with the thought that, well, I got heard and that was all that they were interested in, and they didn't really care what any of us had to say. We cared about what everybody had to say. And so there will be more dialogue on this topic. It's, you know, Alfred is such a great place to be. We want to make sure that we don't look past this small little part of living in our community and make sure it's not a detriment to those that enjoy this piece of beauty that exists here just north of Atlanta. So we go to our other staff members. Any questions for the group? James, anything that you have for the group?
For those of you who have friends, resident, or neighbors, whatever, who may have interest in this but couldn't be here tonight, we were streaming and recording this. It is going to be, it'll be available in a few minutes on our YouTube channel. So just youtube.com/alpharettagov.
Councilmember Hypes, anything that you would like to say as a result of being here and listening?
Thank you. I learned a lot tonight. You guys exposed some ideas about this topic that I had never thought about, and I will be thinking a lot about it. And mostly, thank you. We all love our community, and what makes our community great is that we have passionate and involved citizens who want to come out and look out after each other and take care of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Dorito, any comment you'd like to make real quick?
You got him, Chris.
Quick?
I'd just like to thank my fellow residents for coming out this evening. As our city administrator mentioned already, this has been a great forum, and you know, Councilman Heiss, myself, and the mayor, who had left a little earlier, but we listen intently to this stuff. We take your input. The workshop that we participated in, we did have a lot of questions and concerns about the initial draft of an ordinance. And so this is going to be very helpful with us in redrafting that, addressing the issues everybody raised here this evening, and try to come to some compromise. I think at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is retain the quality of life for everyone that lives here. Those people, those homeowners that live in Alpharetta have a right to the quality of the peaceful environment around their homes as well. So we have to balance that with the fact that there's people here that have a right, personal property rights, to do what they want to do with their property within means and controls of the city. And somebody brought up, I think over here, on enforcement, which is a question I brought up in the workshop. I mean, it's great to pass laws and ordinances, but we also have to address how we're going to enforce it to make sure that it has teeth and that it's going to actually drive the result that the city, and with your input, is trying to achieve here. So thanks for coming out tonight.
One quick thing before everybody leaves. Kathy, Ryan, would you hold up your hands in the back of the room, please? They have some sheets. Those of you who want to stay engaged in this process, please see them on the way out. Share your names, email addresses, so we know how to get in touch with you.
Thank you all. Thank you.